Annyeonghaseyo. Welcome to the 10th Philippine Korean Studies Symposium. I am Jasmine Rambawa from the Department of Communication Research of the UP College of Media and Communication, and I will be your moderator for the first part of the program. For those who have been with us since yesterday, we have learned on research in the realm of gender studies, literature, media, and diplomacy, among others. Today, we will be engaging with research presentations in the field of education, migration, pop culture, and sociology, all in the umbrella of Korean studies. For more than a decade, we have witnessed how PKSS has been able to evolve, adapting to various and drastic changes in terms of research themes, formats, and platforms. We are delighted to welcome our participants in this year's PKSS under the theme A Decade of Korean Studies in the Philippines, a glance at the past, a gaze at the present, a glimpse of the future. PKSS is co-organized by the UP Korea Research Center and the UP Department of Linguistics in partnership with UP Center for International Studies and Korea Copyright Protection Agency. This event is sponsored by the Korea Foundation. On April 27, 2016, the University of the Philippines launched the Korea Research Center, aiming to provide Filipino scholars and researchers with opportunities to widen their interest in Korean studies. The center hopes to be a venue for students and professionals to produce meaningful comparative research and to promote collaborative partnerships among Korean and Philippine institutions. The center serves as a university-wide hub across UP constituent universities in order to help promote and develop Korean studies and sponsor inter-college research and educational activities, as well as facilitates the training of the next generation of Koreanists in the country. The UP Department of Linguistics is an academic institution under the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, which is distinctly focused on the scientific study, preservation, and promotion of the Philippine languages and dialects through teaching, archiving, research, and publication. The department is also mandated to use its research expertise to address language issues in the country. Aside from the Philippine linguistics, the department is also recognized as an expert in teaching the national languages in Asia. It is designated as a Center of Excellence in Foreign Languages by the Philippines Commission on Higher Education. We also wish to thank our followers and supporters and wish to express our gratitude in making events such as this happen. Now, to formally begin today's program, let us get to know our plenary speaker. Dr. Jung-Eun Lee is a senior researcher at the Kinugasa Research Center, Ritsumeikan University, Japan. Her PhD dissertation examined South Korean operated English academies in the Philippines, highlighting their role as a mesostructure that facilitates the mobility of South Korean students and Filipino instructors. Currently, her research focuses on how these academies reconstruct Filipino women as ESL instructors, as well as the experiences and subject formation of these instructors. So to deliver her plenary speech titled How South Korean Entrepreneurs Reconstruct Filipino Women as English Instructors, let us all give a warm round of applause to Dr. Lee.
Magandang umaga po. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jung-Eun Lee from Ritsumeikan University, Japan. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, Dr. Kyung-Min Bang and Korean Research Center in University of the Philippines for giving me the opportunity to present my research as plenary speech. Today, I'd like to talk about my ongoing research on how South Korean entrepreneurs reconstruct Filipino women as English instructor focusing on the private English language school in the Philippines. Then this presentation will proceed in the following order. Next. When it comes to education migration, Asian countries have traditionally been sending countries. However, since the 2000s, many Asian nationals have emerged as destinations for students within the region. Many studies have highlighted how national policies in these countries aim to restructure higher education in order to compete in the global economy. In many cases, the policies designed to attract international students are closely linked to domestic labor market policies or immigration and refugee policies. However, in the case of the Philippines, there is no national policy aimed at attracting international students to higher education or integrating them into the labor force or immigration system. Okay, despite this lack of policy, as you see this graph, the number of international students in the Philippines has been increasing. And more than just the number, this trend is also contributing to a shift in how the Philippines is perceived by young people across Asia. I apologize for using somewhat outdated data, but when we take a closer look at the numbers, we can observe some interesting trends. Unlike other Asian countries, a significant portion of international students in the Philippines do not study at higher education institutions, but rather at other types of institutions. In the Philippines, there are two types of permits related to international students. If you are studying as a regular student at a university, you need to obtain a student visa. On the other hand, if you are under 18 years old or studying at an institution other than a university, you need to acquire a special study permit. When comparing the number of these two categories, we find that number of SSP, special study permit, is much higher than the student visa. Unfortunately, the Philippine government does not release detailed information about the special study permits, such as like what kind of individual, what kind of educational institution requests the most these permits. However, it shows us that understanding international students' mobility in the Philippines requires a focus on non-university institutions. In this presentation, I will focus on private English language schools in the Philippines that are operated by South Korean migrant entrepreneurs with Filipino English instructors. Okay. Then, what is the English language school in the Philippines? I will give a brief introduction about it. English language school in which Filipino instructors teach English as a foreign language to international students who come to the Philippines from Asian countries, mainly South Korea and Japan. The first school was established by the Korean Protestant Missionary Organization in Cavite in 1991. Today, most of these schools are still run by South Korean migrant entrepreneurs, but some are operated by Japanese, especially in Cebu. But it was not popular at the beginning at all in South Korea. However, after Asian financial crisis in South Korea in 1997, with the growing demand for English education, English schools in the Philippines have gained popularity in South Korea. The schools are mainly located in the local central cities such as Cebu, Baguio, and Clark, including Manila City. But one thing we need to be careful is that, especially Clark, many of the schools advertise themselves as being, my school is in Clark, but actually they are opened in Manila City. And since 2010s, not only for South Korean, but also Japanese, Taiwanese students started to come to this English school. Why have this school become so popular among Asian students? Previous studies have suggested several reasons. Firstly, Jung-Eun Lee highlighted the economic conditions of South Korean and Japanese students as a key factor. However, economic reasons alone are not enough to explain why migration occurs. So Suzuki further explained that these schools function as ethnic business for Korean students. He also pointed out that the visa policies in the Philippines make it relatively easy for students to enter the country. But using the concept of ethnic business, it cannot explain why other Asian students also come to study at the English school operated by South Korean in the Philippines. So I discovered that there is a translation network which has been established by South Korean entrepreneurs between South Korea or other Asian countries of students, the Philippines and Western countries such as Canada, Australia, or Ireland. Students are attracted by using this network system because they believe they can gain confidence to speak English and live alone overseas through studying in the Philippines for a certain period of time before going to Canada or Australia on working holiday or studying there. Of course, this network is one of the strategies of the schools in the Philippines to attract more students from Asian countries. However, much of these discussions ignore the role of the labor force, particularly the Filipino instructors who play an important role in supporting these English language schools. Filipino English instructors have made a significant contribution to the development and popularity of English language school in the Philippines. What I found from my field research, the Korean owners or staffs demand and expect their role extends beyond just teaching. And unfortunately, these aspects have been ignored in previous discussions. So, based on these discussions, my research question is how South Korean entrepreneurs hire local Filipinos, mostly women, as an English instructor, and what kind of expectation do they have for them? To find this answer to this question, I use the concept of the intimate labor. What it means to be intimate labor, which Boris and Karinyas define as physical and emotional interaction for social reproduction. Traditionally, intimate labor has been defined as labor related to physical care work, but today, with the development of various service industry and information and communication technology, it has been pointed out that intimate labor is not just limited to the previous types of care work. Then let me explain. As national welfare was cut in global north countries after the 1980s, the demand of care work became globalized and the migratory movement of nurses, caregivers, and domestic workers expanded from the Philippines to foreign countries, especially in global north countries. In addition to domestic work and care associated with women's stereotype, the cheerful, hospitable, and friendly nature associated with image of Filipinos, as well as their familiarity with English due to their colonial history by US, promoted to incorporate Filipino women into the globalization of care. On the other hand, in recent years, with the emergence of new service sector, globalization, based on information and knowledge technology, the Philippine female workforce is being restructured in new ways. Based on their voice service, they are expected to convey cheerfulness, hospitality, and even patience to their customers while speaking fluent English to Western customers and solving the problems. This drastic change between globalization of care work and service industry with knowledge and information, this drastic change in the type of industry continues to manifest itself in conjunction with the image of Filipino women as caring, hospitable, and patient. And such expectation of thus intimate labor are also seen in Korean law English language school. Therefore, from the perspective of intimate labor, this section examines how Korean transform. So therefore, from the perspective of intimate labor, this section examines how Koreans transform the labor force of Filipino women into that of English instructors with intimate labor. To conduct this study, I carried out field research and semi-structured interviews. The research is based on 3 field trips conducted between 2016 and 2024. In order to gather diverse perspectives, I conducted semi-structured interview with Filipino instructors, Korean owners and managers, but some were Japanese as well. I conducted my research in English, Korean, and Japanese. Now I would like to provide an overview of School A, which has been the focus of my fieldwork. Founded in 2013, the school was relatively new when I began my research in 2016. The student body is diverse, students coming from Korea, South Korea, and Japan, followed by Taiwan, Vietnam, and more recently, an increasing number of students from Middle Eastern countries. The school is located in Angeles City, an area that has seen a recent surge in English language schools and international students. Angeles City is adjacent to Clark, an area that was home to a U.S. military base for nearly 100 years. As a result, Angeles City developed a significant base economy with the sex industry flourishing in the area. Although the sex industry continues to thrive, attracting male visitors from Asia and Europe, the city evolved. Today, it is also a destination for retired senior citizens from Western countries, including former US soldiers who migrate to this area. And interestingly, School A hires these senior retired migrants. They hire some of these people as native English instructors. And English language school in Angeles City often promote themselves as being located in Clark, not in Angeles City, in order to distance themselves from the city, association with the sex industry, and concerns about public security, which could potentially deter international students. Then let's move to the discussion section. This section highlights the strategic reliance of Korean entrepreneurs on the existing gender labor division, which incorporates Filipino women, particularly in the context of hiring Filipino English instructors. To begin, I would like to present the gender and age characteristics of the English instructor at School A. A questionnaire survey was conducted in 2016 with 21 participants responding. Among them, 60 were female and 5 were male, and indicating a clear predominance of women in the teaching workforce. Regarding age, the majority of were between the ages of 20 to 24. 6 instructors were aged 25 to 29, and 4 were in their 30s or older. 3 participants didn't provide their age information. The following provides an overview of the prior job experience of Filipino English instructors hired by School A. A significant observation from this data is that 10 out of 21 instructors have prior experience in the BPO industry, with 9 of them having specifically worked in call centers. To summarize, the findings reveal that the majority of Filipino instructors at School A are women in their 20s, with many having prior experience in call centers. Additionally, my field observation suggests that these trends are not unique to School A, but are also observed in other English language schools across different regions. Then, so why are many women with previous experience in call centers working as English instructors at the School A? In response to this question, Yoon, the founder of School A, explained the following. People who study nursing speak English better, those who are trying to go to the US. People from call centers speak English well too. We are trying to hire those people with verified English skills. It is not easy to train them from the beginning. So, Yoon, South Korean founder of School A, hired Filipino women who have been trained to communicate in English for the foreign customers in the global labor market. This hiring strategy allows them to reduce training costs for instructors. But on the other hand, the strategy used by Yoon is supported by the fact that call centers and nurse, in fact, there were only 3 instructors who have qualified as a nurse in the English School A. Is recognized as intimate labor and earning high salaries in the global labor market, but also they face harsh working conditions or narrow immigration policies in the global north countries, which prevent them maintaining their careers. Let me explain details. First, in the case of nurses, they account for the longest history of international migration of Filipino women. This is because the US has had Filipino women trained as nurses since colonial era to treat US soldiers, and later, when there was a shortage of nurses in the US accepted Filipino nurses as migrants. Even today, more than 1/3 of registered nurses in the Philippines work abroad, accounting for 1/4 of all remittances sent by overseas nurses Filipinos. However, it is not easy to work abroad for them due to narrow immigration policy in global north countries, even if you have a nursing education qualification. And the working environment for nurses in the Philippines is also known to be hard and very low income. On the other hand, call centers for American companies today are jobs where many Filipino women are currently working in the Philippines. The work of answering phones calls from the Philippines for US customers is very popular because it does not require going abroad anymore and offers a relatively high salary and social security benefits that were previously unavailable in the Philippines. In addition, call center workers are known for their high level of English proficiency as they receive around 100 hours of English training before they begin working in a call center. In recent years, call centers have hugely expanded, supporting the development of the Philippines economy. On the other hand, this call center deals with American customers. Working hours are reversing day and night, and they are often attacked by verbal abuse from the customers in Western countries, and which often cause them to become sick and lonely. So the English schools try to employ those women that I mentioned above, who left this job, who couldn't keep their career because of its hardness and hardness. Okay, then let's move to next. As I mentioned earlier, the A English School employs retired migrants from English-speaking countries such as United States, Canada, and Australia as native instructors as well as Filipino instructors. And I found out School A racialize instructors and make unequal environment for instructors. First, let's find out what kind of role they expect to Filipino instructor but not native ones. The Japanese manager in A school said, when you receive an education in Japan, it is quite rare to be praised by teachers. So this makes Japanese people feel happy because it is not common in Japan. And also, South Korean owner in other school, he also said, what I expect from Filipino teacher is infinite patience. And he also added that because they can't expect that from the native native instructors at all. What they spoke, the importance of being patient with hospitable presence, showing care and patience to students who are new to English and life abroad. And they expect as the role of Filipino instructors, not only teaching English, but they also added that they expect the hospitality patient from the Filipino instructor, but they also added that they cannot expect the same thing from native English instructors. So Korean owners and also managers expect Filipino instructors to have hospitality, care, and patient abilities that are far removed from English skills. Next. Furthermore, within the school, Filipino and native instructor treated differently in terms of salary and work allocations. As it turns out, Filipino instructors are paid less but bear more of the workload. What does that mean? First, in terms of salary, according to the hiring advertisement of School A Filipino instructor earns 17,000 to 14,000 to 17,000 pesos per month for an 8-hour workday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But native instructors are paid 350 pesos per hour. If it converts the monthly salary of a Filipino to a daily wage, it would be about 700 to 850 pesos. It means a native instructor works 2 or 3 hours a day. The native instructor can earn the same or more than the daily wage of a Filipino instructor if native instructor works 2 to 3 hours a day. The only criteria for the different salary is the origin of the instructor, not the ability or experiences as an instructor. The distribution of classes between two instructors is also different. In general, classes at School A are divided into grammar, reading, speaking, and listening. But at this school, grammar and reading are taught on one-on-one basis class, and these classes are generally taught by Filipinos. And one-on-one classes is actually a big sell point for every English school in the Philippines. But on the other hand, native English instructors are only in charge of speaking classes. Now, why is this that? One, it is thought to be to keep labor costs down. And two, I think this is the most important. It is because of the demand for showing care or intimacy of Filipino instructors to students when they have one-on-one class. Filipino instructors are used to say that one-on-one classes require more flexibility and patience with students' individual English ability, origin, and personality. In contrast, in speaking classes, instructors can do what you want, and in fact, it is an open secret that native instructors only play movies or talk about what they want to talk about in the speaking class. Thus, compared to native instructors and Filipino English instructors, Filipino English instructors are forced to do a lot of work, being hired at low wages, and yet assigned to one-on-one classes that expect intimate labor work. Then, what do Filipino instructors think about these expectations? Interestingly, Filipino instructors also recognize that this work is inseparable from intimacy. Rachel, who has been an English instructor for 10 years, spoke this way about working as an instructor at an English school. We are not only instructors but also personal assistants. I always try to help students as family and friends. There are many house helpers in our country. It is not because we are poor. It is because we can take care of others. It is not about money. It is love. It is people. On the other hand, under these circumstances I pointed out, Filipino instructors face several difficulties. I share two of them here. The first is unequal employment conditions and low wages. Javier, a Filipino instructor, revealed the frustration about the unequal environment this way. Native teachers are paid more than Filipino teachers. Just because you are a native teacher doesn't mean you can teach. They only teach speaking classes, but they don't interact with students. But we Filipino teachers give our effort to make them understand better. So, there is a rare case, but there are some who take action. There are those who take action to change this kind of unequal situation. But even if they do, it is not easy to actually change the English school system. So best like this. We have already gave these proposals, some proposals to the owners about salary, fighting for salary, and everything. What was the response? Nothing. They just said, we will see. So, when low wages and unequal working environments are imposed in such an unequal structure, some instructors decided to go back to the call centers where they used to work before because it pays more even though working is so hard there. Another is that they may be subjected to gaze and harassed sexually. What Rachel described here was also experienced by other Filipino instructors as well. Okay, then let me read this. Some students and native teachers who go to bars and other places think that Filipino women are easy. Then they start to look teachers the way they look at the woman in the bar. So this is due in part to the sex industry that has taken root in the area, Manila City, since colonial times, and the men who have objectified Filipino women as sexual objects through the sex industry gaze at or harass Filipino instructors in this way in English schools as well. The physical and emotional closeness between students and instructors in English language school in the Philippines, where care work is required, may further increase the likelihood of such gaze and harassment. However, Filipino instructors are not only experiencing marginalization or exploitation by these working experiences. Rather, they are using the experience of intimate labor experiences to gain new careers or expand their income. It was during the pandemic that this became evident. During the pandemic, the Philippines enforced one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. As a result, all English schools were forced to close, and many schools appeared there that eventually closed. But the situation for Filipino instructor was a little different. Beth, a Filipino instructor, described her life during the pandemic this way. During the pandemic, it gave me more advantages. Why? Because I was referred by one mom to another mom. I was able to have more money at the time. Look at this community for, right? We have job and it was my high time too. I shared my blessing. I bought some kids and I gave them. Not only that, but the most Filipino instructors I talked to that they said they were able to earn more income during the pandemic. Why is that? The relationship that instructor had established with the students through their intimate labor relationship is kept even after students came back to their countries via SNS, and it turns out the valuable social capital or social network for English instructors during the pandemic. Their previous students concerned about instructor situation, then they introduce their friends or relatives who want to study English online with Filipino instructors. And when they started teaching English online as a freelancer, they were able to negotiate their own tuition fee directly with students, unlike an English school, which greatly increased their income. But for some instructor, teaching English online as a freelance instructor didn't last for a long time. Beth added this: teaching online is not stable. Students can quit very quickly. Under an agency, if you don't have classes, you don't get paid. The pay is low and there is no compensation. So, when Beth didn't have many students by herself, she began to invite students through agencies in China and the Philippines. Then, when that happened, her income reduced and also prevented her from getting any kind of social protection as a worker. This is exactly the kind of challenges that has been identified as a problem in the gig economy, and Beth has had to deal with it too. So when I interviewed Beth last year, at the time she was preparing to go to Taiwan as Filipino workers overseas to teach English there. And Filipino instructors also get an opportunity to discover new possibilities for themselves and new lifestyle through close relations with students. Lisa said that the students she met at the school A helped her find a new perspectives on life and a goal for her life. It made her to develop her professional teaching English, and that's why she decided to go to university again to get qualification to be a teacher. It is also an opportunity for Filipino instructors to learn about a new consumer culture. As Rachel mentioned here, when students take their instructor to cafes or restaurants they haven't been there before, Filipino instructor acquire the consumer culture of in Japan, Korea, or Thailand, and they themselves becoming willing to engage in such consumption. And the impact of the relationship with students for Filipino instructors extends to the point where Filipino English instructors begin to rethink their intimacy with their close family and community. Beth and Rachel said this way: I don't want to force my children to help me as much as possible. I want to save money for my retirement. I don't want to rely on my children, yes, she said. And next, I began to think that I didn't have to see my family and friends always. I learned from my interaction with students from Japan or Korea that I don't have to lend my money to my sister. As many academic studies have shown, what characterizes the Philippine society is mutual aid with their family and community, which is why the global market has also commodified these characteristics of the Philippine society and exploit the stereotype of Filipino as intimate labor in diverse ways. English schools in the Philippines also hire Filipino instructors at low wage while taking advantage of such stereotypes of Filipinos, especially Filipino women. Ironically, however, Filipino instructors are trying to break the cycle of this kind of mutual aid or self-sacrifice to help their families or community and rethink or try to manage that how to handle their intimacy among them through the interaction with the students from Japan or South Korea. We might say that this is a kind of paradox in the intimate labor for English instructors. Okay, then let me conclude this presentation. The English school run by South Korean migrant entrepreneurs in the Philippines is transforming Filipino women as English instructor with intimate labor, relying on gender global division of the labor market, and racializing Filipino instructors as well as expecting intimacy and patience. Filipino instructors are encountering unequal working environments, being objectified, and experiencing sexual harassment sometimes. But on the other hand, Filipino instructors use their relationship with students established through intimate labor to increase their income. Moreover, through these experiences, Filipino instructors start to rethink or manage their intimacy relationship with their families and community. Okay, then I'm gonna stop my presentation here. Next. Maraming salamat po. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the very insightful presentation. I actually learned a lot from your talk. And now we are open for questions and comments from our audience. Do we have questions or comments? Or shall I take it? See, please introduce yourself and your.
Thank you very much, San. I'm Jung-Eun Lee from Toyo University at Manila University as well. I have a question and a clarification as well. You mentioned that some of these English instructors are or were BPO employees, some were nurses, etc. So I was wondering if you encountered some who were actually trained to be English teachers. I'm asking because this is actually labor exploitation, right? They're paid very low. It's not only racialized, but it's also gendered. But I was also thinking the fact that they're not really skilled to begin with, right? So they don't have the formal skills. They may have the informal skills because they can speak English, right? And some of them were BPO trained, but as so to speak, real English instructors. So I was wondering if you came across in your interview some who were actually, teachers who have degrees or who have licenses to teach. That's one. And then second, because we always look at native versus non-native, right, or semi-native or something. Of course, there's a lot of work done on English teachers, even in Japan and Korea, Filipino English teachers. So, of course, we know when we talk about native, right, it's usually the image of, or native English speaker, it's usually the image of a white male, right, or maybe white passing. So if you have an American accent, right? But, and so I think that's me, so yeah, how do you, qualify what is native, right? How do you define Because I guess when we talk about native English speaker, right, we're coming from a Western perspective, considering that native Filipinos are actually native speakers, right? So, I'd like you to, maybe, can you rethink that category of nativeness? So, those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you for your question. Hanla-san. Okay, then I'll try to answer your question as much as I can do. About your first questions, yes, there are some teachers who have qualified to teach at public schools. And actually, as I show one of the instructor, Filipino instructor class, actually, after this experience teaching English in the Filipino English school, after that she went to university again and she got a qualification to teach English at public school. So now, last year she tried to go overseas as an English instructor in Taiwan, but it didn't work or well. So now she's teaching English at not only teaching, but she's teaching at public school. So what I wanted to say is, as you pointed out, there are also many instructors who are not only experience at call center, but also experience at public school, or also have a qualification for teaching in the Philippine school. And second question about nativeness, I think that is you made a point. And in this presentation, I just followed the definition of native teacher, what school want to define. I'm not trying to, so I don't mean that I'm following their definition about native, but I just want to follow what they think, what they mention about native. But so according to my field research, they just mention a native teacher from where you're from. You are from United States, you are from like Australia, something like that.
That's a third question.
Hello, Professor. I am Sidney Bata from Plenary. When you had a slide there earlier, you said they started in 1991. And I just recalled my brother's experience. He was 15 years old. He taught in somewhere in Pampanga or Cavite. And then he was an underage, and then he was doing it part-time. And then I remember also, same thing you said one-on-one. And then do you have any accounts of such thing as underage and also part-time teachers?
I'm sorry, can I ask once again your question?
My brother taught something like such, but it was in 1992, I believe. And then he was underage, he was below 18 years old. And he was a part-timer, because I saw yours are all full-timer, they got 70,000. But for locals, for Filipinos, do you have any recall of underage and also part-time teaching?
Okay, thank you for your question. Actually, at the time in 1991 or 1992, the school was not that big like now. So it's very small and it's very informal style. So I think the school really didn't care how old the teacher is. So I think that is why possible at the time. Even though you are under 18, you can teach there as a part-timer. But I think it is not available for now, because it's becoming more formal business or normal industry. That's my question.
Okay, do you have other questions from our audience?
If there's no one. I'd like to ask now somehow Korean studies related question. So in your research, you talked about intimate labor, right? And the interaction between the student and the teacher. Of course, interaction between the student and teacher has also like a power relationship, but at the same time, intimate relationship, because as you said, Filipino teachers are caring, patient, etc. So I was wondering, from the perspective of the Korean students, how did it shape or did it change their perceptions of Filipinos? And on the other hand, especially with the Korean wave right now. So I was wondering how many Filipinos went into English teaching because they would want to be in interaction with Korean students. I'm asking this because in my own research, I also found out like not intimate labor, but intimate connections, intimate relationships being formed between the teacher, the Filipino teacher, and the student, right, leading to marriage migrations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. It is very complicated to answer. Well, yeah, but I will try to answer. Yeah, many of Korean students, not only Korean students, but also Japanese students as well. When they encounter Filipino instructors in the English school, then their perception of the Philippines or Filipinos, Filipino people, has changed very dramatically. They realize that how Filipinos people are smart because they don't speak English, but they don't speak English very well. Smart, and they are very brave, and they support their family even they are in very young age. Because many of, especially Japanese women, many of them are in the late 20s. But as I showed earlier, many of English instructors in the first of 20s, so they're really touched by how they are strong, how they are smart. So I think, yeah, that experience really changed their perceptions about Filipinos in a good way. But on the other hand, I think Filipino instructor, especially who I met at school, actually at the beginning, they have good image about Koreans, but gradually, Korean is too strict and too push about business. So they are more into Japanese culture or Taiwanese culture because they say they are more soft and they are not the push people business. So the instructor that I met, they really want to go to work in Japan and Taiwan, but not in Korea. Because they say, oh, Korean are too strict for me, so it is not for me. Yeah, they explain me always like that. So they really, yeah, I think they, through those experience, they realize that, okay, how different between Korea, Japan, and Taiwanese culture. Yeah, and they know which culture, which people are more fit with that.
Question? It's clear.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot. It's your very insightful presentations. I'm just wondering is like whether you could kind of explain a little bit more about students. Because you're just talking about the teachers and also older English school. But I guess these the teacher, perhaps they need to, or they are forced to tune into the demands from the students. So I guess it's very important to understand whether those students are like young age or they're staying there for just like a short time, or is it those the Korean migrants who stayed in the Inhela area. So it depends on the students' demand. I guess the role of the Filipinos teachers could be changed. So that's something I just want to ask. And another one is like, because you interview with the Japanese owners as well, right? So is there any differences between the Koreans owners and Japanese owners, how they evaluate the market, right? It's because it depends on they evaluate the market. They probably provide different services and different requirements of the teacher. So finally, my third question is about going to the intimacy labor. Because you just bring in the concept of intimacy labor. But I was just wondering, is this the meaning of intimacy in here? Is it really real intimacy, or is it something that kind of making the bridge between native and non-native? You know what I'm saying? It's like the Filipinos and their English abilities and their kind of position is something between completely non-native Korean and Japanese, and then really the Western native. So it's like, in very much in between positions, so that non-native speaker, they want to kind of practices their Englishes with more caring and then more kind of friendlier kind of atmosphere to improve the English, and then move to because you just mentioned about the Philippines can be one of the transit spot to move to the Canada or Australia. So I was kind of curious that is this concept of intimacy can be more, more carefully kind of theorized. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that comment. Okay, thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for question. Okay, how to answer this question? Okay, then let me answer about your second question firstly. Yeah, I think there are a big difference between Korean owners and Japanese owners. How to handle their business. Firstly, Korean owner who run English school. They're really focusing on how we can make you success in English. How you definitely you can make it a good English speaker, or you can have higher TOEIC test at here. They really focus on that. But on the other hand, Japanese owner, they really try to put Japanese culture in the English schools, and they are not trying to focus on English, but not only focusing on English again, but also manner, culture. Please learn how to behave in school, how to behave having like meals at school, how to behave to study in class. And they say just manner, they just use the term of manner, but from my perspective, because I know both cultures, Japan and Korea, they really put Japanese culture, Japanese way to behave, the thinkings, to put the English education in the industry. I think that is my answer for your second question. And about your first question, yeah, I think as you said, yeah, I think exactly the demand of students is also very important to. Yeah, how should I answer? The students, I think as you said, the teachers try to show their and practice their intimacy differently according to the demand of students. For example, it was not in Manila City but in Manila, Quezon City. There was one school and there was one student, and she was 11, 12. Yeah, 11, 12, and she was staying there for months without her mom. So at last, finally, the instructor tried to stay with her in the dormitory for a while, and she always cared that a child not only studying time but also they slept together, they had meal together in the small room dormitory. She really cared and showed intimacy. Depends on what she needed because she was very small. So yeah, that is my answer to your first question. And about your third question, I think I cannot answer to your third question for now, but I think this is very important point. So I'll try to answer your third question later. Thank you so much.
Alright, so I think we have time for one more question. If there are other people in our audience who would like to ask. Going once. Okay, going twice. Okay, maybe before we wrap this up, I am really interested in the topic that you presented, Dr. Lee. These are some inputs or insights now coming from the perspective of someone who studied language education. I think Filipino English teachers are really nice. Okay. So we are really nice. It's not part of the training, but we are really nice. It's something that's inherent. I think it's also cultural that Filipino teachers, especially in the basic education, we really kind of treat students like family. And even if perhaps the teachers didn't have training on teaching, they experience that with their teacher and is also putting it forward. And it's something that maybe you should look into also further in the characteristic of your Filipino English teachers. And that's why also it's interesting that you're using intimate labor for language teaching, and it's actually something I think that studying Filipino teachers in general should also that's a concept that can be used for studying Filipino teachers in general, because teaching in the Philippines is actually really intimate labor. I tell you, when you teach at the basic ed, you are friends with the parents, with the students, and so on. Another thing that you can look into is also with the acculturation, because sometimes Koreans, Taiwanese, or Japanese would go to a different country to really immerse themselves with the language and culture of those who are speaking their target language. And one problem perhaps in the Philippines is that when you leave the center or the school, we don't speak English anymore. So maybe that's something that you can also look at if you're looking into the choice of country to visit. And it's really something that's very eminent. It's something that's been a part of our conversations with my MA classmates, and why Koreans put a premium really on the native instructor despite not having teaching background. I think that's something that we get in the realm of Korean studies. It's something that we really have to look into. Why is there a need to hire native speakers? Lastly, if you want to collaborate, then that's fine. Maybe another thing that we can look into is in the Philippines, a lot of teachers really are female, and that's something that's gender specific. So, and in our class in language education, in a class with 10 students, only one is male, or sometimes there is none. So it's actually something that's gendered, something that we can also look into in the future. But not now, don't worry. Alright, so I hope that you enjoyed and you learned a lot from the speech of Dr. Lee. So let's round of applause for Dr. Lee once again. And with that, we invite Dr. Gallego and Dr. Bay to award the Certificate of Appreciation and Token. So we only have Dr. Bay, sorry. So I will read the certificate of appreciation. Oh, so this certificate is proudly presented to Dr. Jung-Eun Lee for presenting her paper entitled How South Korean Entrepreneurs Reconstruct Filipino Women as English Instructors at the 2025 10th Philippine Korean Studies Symposium, a decade of Korean studies in the Philippines, a glance at the past, and a gaze at the present, a glimpse of the future, held at the University of the Philippines, Quezon City, Philippines, awarded on the 29th of April 2025, signed Jung-Eun Lee, PhD, Director of Philippine Korean Research Center. So, it's a round of applause.